I caught stripes listening to Let's Not Meet. So when these are as bad as I expect them to be, I'll kill myself. That'll be creepy, right? This happened ages ago, when I used to babysit. I was maybe 13, living in the countryside, and was babysitting most of the children in my street. 20 houses maximum. This particular neighbor would love to go out on Wednesday because there was this Latin dance class going on in a nearby bar. So I was used to babysit. For her, and knew she'd always come back very late. That specific night, the oldest of three was a little difficult, and I didn't want to go to sleep. I struggled with putting him to bed and afterwards was tired. I studied my maths a little and around midnight decided to take a nap until the kid's mom came back. A few minutes after falling asleep, I hear someone frantically knocking at the door trying to open it. It was the neighbor with her 2 children. It was a winter and we easily had 3 feet of snow and temperature outside must have been around negative 21 degrees Celsius or below 5 Fahrenheit. The kids only had their pajamas on and an unzipped jacket. She was wearing jeans, a wool shirt, and winter boots. I could see the fear in her eyes as I struggled unlocking the door. I panicked and had her walk all the way around the house to the patio door. When she got in, she quickly told me to bring all of the children downstairs, turn off all the lights, and not to answer the door to anyone. The kids kept asking, "Who is Daddy going to kill? Who is Daddy going to kill?" And she kept muting them, saying nothing was going to happen, and then she left. I woke up all the kids, brought them all in the playroom in the basement, and asked them to play silently. The oldest, who hadn't been long asleep, was asking what was going on, and I kept telling him it was a special occasion where he could play late with his neighbor friends. I calmed down the 2 other kids, telling them no one was going to die, but in my mind, my time had come. I could see myself being shot while trying to protect the kids. I was trying to figure out how to stay alive, or at least how to keep them alive. I wasn't sure trying to be a hero, or I wasn't trying to be a hero, but I was trying to convince myself that if it came down to that, I would have to try and protect them. I called 911, but started shaking and crying so much I didn't know what to do. It was an answering machine asking if I wanted the cops, the ambulance, or the firefighters. I called my mom, told her quickly what was going on, and she called the cops and joined me. As she got in the driveway, the neighbor's husband was walking up the street with a huge axe. My mom got into the house, locked the door, and cracked open a window and asked what was going on while he was approaching the house. He asked her to come out and confront him, thinking it was his wife. My mother then explained to him that she was the babysitter's mother and came after getting a worried 13-year-old's call. He then asked us to give him his wife, but we didn't know where she was. He argued a little with my mom, but she was so calm, it calmed me down. I still admire her for that night. After 10 to 15 minutes of arguing, he walked back home carrying his axe, and a few seconds later, his wife knocked on the patio door behind the house and came in. She was crying and was apologizing to my mother for the whole situation. She thought her neighbor was home, not the babysitter. My mother asked me to go check on the kids while she was taking care of the wife. A few minutes later, 2 police cars arrived and they came in, spent time with the wife, asking tons of questions, then me, then my mother. In the meantime, the woman I was babysitting for arrived. They interviewed her too. They asked me and my mom if we were ready to go to court, if the woman pressed charges against her husband, and surprisingly, she never did. Turns out, she had just announced to her firefighter husband that she was sleeping with her boss in order to get a raise because they were struggling financially. He got his firefighting axe and said he was going to kill the bastard, but she wanted to stop him. That's why she brought the kids and left. I was always scared of him afterwards, and whenever I saw his children, I would check if they had any signs of violence, but they moved about 6 months later, and we moved 2 years later. So, let's never meet again. Here's another one. When I was 10, my father, older sister, and I went to Walmart. My sister and I like to wander alone in stores, so my father had invested in 3 walkie-talkies. I was by myself, walking through the bedding section, before I was getting a new bedspread, because I was looking intently at one when I felt that I was being watched. I looked over to the beginning of the aisle, and a large man in overalls and dirty brown hair was just looking at me. I decided to walk in the other direction and speed walk to the pet section, asking my father, through the walkie-talkie, where he was. He didn't answer. I made it to the dog food and was happily next to another shopper when he walked by the aisle. Thinking he didn't see me, I let out a sigh of relief. I asked my father again where he was, and again, no answer. I felt like things were safe when I turned around, and this man was at the end of the aisle, standing there. I quickly walked away, on the plan to head to the customer service desk to ask them to call my father. As I walked, parallel to me, this man was matching my steps, keeping me from reaching the front of the store. I changed directions, trying to lose him, and in my 10-year-old mind, I thought running to the bathroom would be safe. I ran and hid in a stall. I heard his footsteps as he entered and saw his shoes below the stall door. Then I heard an angry woman's voice say, "Hey, get out of here, pervert!" Because he was in the ladies' bathroom, and this was before, like all that trans bullshit where he's like, "No, I could be in this bathroom, I'm a lady." Anyway, the woman knocked on the stall's door and asked, "Are you okay?" I opened and hugged her and started crying. I told her everything, and she walked with me holding my hand to the customer service desk, and she waited with me until my father showed up. I told him what happened. Despite the lady verifying it, he didn't believe me. That's so sad. Her father didn't believe her. That's so sad. But I guess that's how things go. Here's another one. From 2006 to 2008, I was a student at university in England studying paramedic science. This course was a 2-year fast track into becoming a qualified paramedic, or EMT. The course involved placements at various points throughout both years, and first we spent an evening or a night in dispatchers. I'll never forget some of those calls. For example, a man waking up in bed next to his wife who had died during the night, and next we were stationed with patient transport service, taking patients to their hospital appointments when they couldn't get there alone. Finally, after waiting a good 6 months for the opportunity, it was time to spend a prolonged placement with the 999 crews. You could choose a couple of preferred locations, and I was fortunate enough to be given the ambulance station close to my home, so I moved back to my parents' home that winter for a full term, leaving my university buddies behind. In hindsight, I wish that I hadn't, because it turned out to give me far less interesting experience. The station was in Buxton, Derbyshire. Google map it. It's the middle of nowhere territory. It's also 45 minutes from the nearest hospital, so you better not get badly hurt up there. Only people did. One evening, we respond to a call where a guy has come off his bike on the Cat and Fiddle run. It's named after a pub by the same name on that road, which passes over the Pennines Mountains. Bikers love to bomb it up and down. It's notorious. The guy broke a brick wall with his body. Legs were over his shoulders. We took him with blue lights to the enforcement hospital, and I don't think he survived. This is where things got messed up. We turn out of our hospital, travel maybe half a mile, and get flagged down by a pedestrian. She shouts through the window that somebody has been beaten badly. We later found out that this was the case of somebody bumping into somebody else in a bar, nothing more. At the exact moment, a guy in a red shirt stumbles out from a side street and collapses in the road. I had been in the rear passenger seat of the patient compartment, my mentor and her technician riding up front. They get out before me to help him whilst I open up the side bay. Stupidly, I climb out as my mentor helps him in. That's the point at which I notice two things. He isn't wearing a red t-shirt, he's topless, and saturated head to waist in his own blood. There's a mob of people heading straight at us, maybe 10, maybe 15, I forget. I'm still outside in the ambulance and pretty much frozen in terror. I'm only 19 at this point, and a pussy. This was 2017. Thankfully, my mentor hauls me inside and locks the door. Instantly, she turns to me and asks if the rear door is locked. It is not. They open it from the outside. My mentor pushes them back. I couldn't believe it. Heckles them, telling them to pick on a group of people, not just one man, and she then manages to lock the door. What happens next will stick with me forever, and clearly has, as I'm telling this story, nearly 10 years later. They began to try to flip the ambulance. Meanwhile, another guy starts hammering the side window, shatters it, cuts himself wide open with blood everywhere, but keeps going. They were animals. There is a window between the rear and the front cabin, and we see a police car approaching. He doesn't stop and continues straight past. Please give UK cops guns. I do not blame him for stopping. Okay, later I did find out that the keys were still in the ignition, but nobody had attempted to enter the cabin through sheer luck. Anyway, crazy bloodthirsty hooligan mob, let's not meet again. Here's the news story from the night that it happened. Ambulance is attacked and call out. Wow. I guess it did happen. Where's the part about it trying to be flipped? A crowd of men had been beating him, broke a window, and rocked the van. My lord. Ain't that something? I guess I could read another one. How long is this video anyway? Oh, yeah. My stepfather is an idiot. He's an ex-alcoholic drug addict who is heavily involved in several Catholic churches and the local AA community, Alcoholics Anonymous. For those who don't know, the drugs and alcohol must have seriously fried his brain because he still has really bad judgment and decision-making skills, especially when it comes to people. He has brought so many sketchy people into my life. Thank God, nothing serious has happened. I get it. He's trying to help others who are struggling with the same battle he went through, and maybe he is making a difference in some people's lives, but he's been bringing these kinds of people into my life since I was 4 years old. Some of them even lived with us for a while. I had kids young. I was 20, and when I had my son, and 23 when I had my daughter. When my son had his first birthday, my stepdad and mom retired. My mom had me when she was 40 and decided to travel. going on mission trips with their church and moving to another state. They started working with the Catholic organization that specifically helps people who struggle with alcohol and drug addictions. Working with Catholic organizations that specifically help with people who struggle with alcohol and drug addictions. The church gave them housing among their nuns and priests, and paid them all a small amount of money to buy food and necessities while they worked with them. One year, around Christmas time, my parents came home for their holiday and brought an older nun with them. She was probably in her 50s. My family got together and went to Santa's workshop, which was super crowded. My mom, stepdad, and their nun friend, and my sisters and their kids came as well. My daughter was about 6 months old, maybe less. She's a beautiful redheaded baby, and I've received many comments from my family and strangers on how beautiful she and her red hair are, and probably have a few other stories of people who don't understand personal boundaries regarding children. The nun was immediately taken by how beautiful my baby is, and kept touching her, talking to her and wanting to hold her. It was immediately uncomfortable because this was my first time meeting her. Also, she wasn't acting this way with any of the other children that were with us. My son, who was 3-year-old at the time, has since been diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and was a handful, running all over the place, getting into everything, and it's hard going places with him and her without their dad. He didn't come with us because he was most likely working, so I think I was distracted because my son was getting into something he wasn't supposed to, and I let go of the stroller for a second, and this nun immediately took it. She told me she would give me a break, and since she was a friend of my parents and my family was all around us, I decided to let this nun push my daughter in the stroller. Another incident happened where my son was getting into something and I was distracted again for less than a minute, and when I turned back around, the nun and my daughter were gone. I freaked out, and my whole family was still around me and no one knew where this nun went. She didn't say anything to anyone about leaving, and my family and I immediately started looking everywhere. Luckily, there were so many of us, and found the nun at the front of the building, right near the exit. It was terrifying. When we found her, she just said she was taking my daughter on a stroll. I decided to leave right after that happened, and so did everyone else in my family. Luckily, I haven't seen her since. So yeah, creepy old nun that knows my parents. Let's not meet again. I swear to God with these, man. I swear to God. The roommate from hell. Look how fucking long this one is. You're killing me. Oh my God. Oh my, there's pictures now. Alright. English is not my first language, so expect language errors. That's going to be the real horror in this story. So, a few years ago, I was studying on a university in a major city. Normally, I'm living in a small town more than 70 kilometers from it. So as you might imagine, I had to rent a room. I found one in a 4-story building. Most of it was rented by various students, and the flat I was supposed to live in looked like that. Behind the front door, there was 5 to 6 meters long corridor, a very narrow one. On the right, there was 2 doors. Behind the first one, there was, boy, is it going to be more of this? And my roommate were supposed to live in a kitchen practically combined with the bedroom, which was really hygiene positive, but old building. On the end of the corridor, there was a big room that I was going to live in. For a year or so, it was really great. My roommate was a female student that was rather nice. She even cooked things occasionally, which was a life-saving thing considering the fact that if I were to do this, I would probably burn water black. Ha ha ha. But then she got pregnant with her boyfriend and had to say goodbye to studying. Here enters my second roommate. In fact, even after living with him for nearly half a year, all that happened then, I don't even remember his name. Really, that should tell you all you need to know about our relationship. He was 20 to 22 years old, whose face I don't even remember either. I saw him maybe twice, for he was working, studying, when I was in the flat, and vice versa. So time passes, and we're ignoring each other. Everything is rather fine. Then, things start to happen. The first warning was a call from our landlord. He is a tad bit ugly of an old man, especially with his teeth looking horrible, either missing or dark yellow, but I can't say anything was wrong about him as a landlord. Once I accidentally paid him too much and he quickly returned the surplus, so yeah, he was an honest guy. He had several flats in the city that he was renting out to students. He said to me that he would like me to watch over my roommate to see if something is wrong with him. Something happened in his workplace. I think he hit someone and was talking gibberish about that when he met with the landlord about money. We paid him not through the bank account, but hand to hand. He visited us once a month for that. So later that day, I returned to the flat, and what did I see? A kitchen cupboard is broken. It looked like an elephant sat on it, and the remains were spread over practically the entire room. The roommate is going in circles, looking like he is trying to clean the place. I ask him what happened, and he answers something about a party ended up wrong. So right now I should probably say why I haven't left the place straight away. I'm a kinda sheltered kid, living in a small town in a not so big and rather peaceful European city. I am a student, and all my life I haven't even seen marijuana. Oh, alrighty, that is the new way to spell that to throw the cops off the trail. I never witnessed any crimes. For me, it was, well, he acts strangely, but hey, maybe he's having a bad day. Yeah, it's not like grounds to just immediately get the hell out of there. God, continue. I went to bed, or rather, a mattress. Okay, dude. Okay. I went to bed, or rather a mattress, for I slept only on it. It wasn't easy to sleep, because he was making noises in the kitchen. I even went there to ask him to be silent. He was so surprised by me speaking that he literally jumped. He said something alongside, "Sure, okay," and then it was a tad bit less noisy. The fact that the kitchen was still a mess, even though he was there all the time, should be a second warning. Once again, I didn't connect the dots. I only barricaded the door just in case by pushing a table that stood next to them, so the edge of them should prevent the door from opening. Also, he had his right foot in a bucket. No idea why. Okay. I was brutally awoken around 4 a.m. by him screaming that I have to open the door right now. His voice was angry, not scared, so I doubted there was a fire or something, so I loudly refused. Then he opened them by kicking them. The table with the computer on it was pushed back from the impact. The big part of the jamb broke off too. He entered my room and started screaming something incoherently, and he knew what I was planning. He didn't attack me, he was just screaming. He also broke a ceiling lamp with my favorite cup that lied on the table next to the computer. I, on the verge of panic, sent a text message to my father, who was regrettably more than 70 kilometers away from me, about what was happening. He tried to call the police, but for some dumb reason in this country, they can only act if a direct witness or a victim is calling, so there was no help from them, which was completely retarded things, seriously. The next half hour was strange. My roommate kept screaming things incoherently. I think he somehow believed that I am after his life and continued to demolish the flat. I was still on my mattress, unable to leave because he was blocking the only way out. He nearly assaulted me when he saw my gloves. It was right after winter, which, as he decided, were proof that I was a hitman, as I won't leave fingerprints if I kill him while wearing them. He was maybe half a meter from me while charging at me, when suddenly he jumped back screaming that he won't let me kill him that way. This routine replayed several times. Several times he entered the room to scream something incoherently, only to leave. In the end, I managed to get out by persuading him. The hardest persuasion skill test in my life. Well, hopefully he had a whole bunch of charisma. That if I leave the house without taking the keys, then he will be safe. You can imagine how I felt moving through the corridor and unlocking the door, with him being in the kitchen behind me, which was full of knives. In the end, I, however, managed to flee, wearing only my pajamas and with a phone in my hand. I took refuge in another apartment in the same building, in which a relative of the landlord was living with two other persons. I knew him because once a landlord couldn't collect rent in person and asked me to give the money to them. They were even kind enough to make me tea. I stayed there until the police came, then returned to my room. The roommate opened the door while I was packing everything that was valuable, mainly my computer and my books. He was in the kitchen. Policemen tried to interrogate him, but rather unsuccessfully. He wasn't really responsive, but he looked like his attack was over. They left him there after telling him to go for a walk to cool his head. I, in the same time, left the flat. I waited for an hour in a safe distance from this place. My father picked me up and we drove back to my town. A few hours later, my landlord called me. Sorry. A few hours later, my landlord called by me after I left the flat. Came there. The roommate was still there, and once again, he ended up having some sort of mental breakdown. Landlord called the police once again, and as the fella barricaded himself on the balcony, threatening to throw things on people if he wasn't left alone. This time the police came in force and practically drug him out of the building. Now, the thing is that I don't know exactly what happened to him after that. Ever since the incident, I heard two versions. First was that he's some sort of instantaneous insanity, schizophrenia, a paranoidal one, I mean. I learned later on that he was ripping cables out of the walls and he was searching for government-made wiretapping. The second was that he took some drugs, then mixed them with alcohol, and he somehow overdid it. The police searched through the room and they found nothing. My room. The wooden thing is part of the jam that flew halfway off the room when he broke through the door. Well, there you go. The door he broke through, the metal thingy. Well, there you go, man. Drugs are a hell of a thing. Drugs, baby. Let's read one more. This better be good, man. So this story happened back when I was in 5th grade in 2005, when I lived in western Montana. My bedroom was shared with my 2nd grade sister, and we had a king-size bed that we shared. To describe my house a little, our room was facing the backyard, but was a basement room. Basically, standing up looking out of the window in my room, I was eye level with the ground outside. Up and to the left above my window, I could see onto our deck, which looked into our upstairs kitchen. Kind of confusing, but bear with me. Anyway, this particular night, my sister and I were having a sleepover, and our friend was in the bedroom with us. When we were falling asleep around 1 a.m., our friend woke us up to show us that a deer was on our deck. We looked up and we all saw a deer on the deck, in quotations. This was normal in Montana, so we laid back down. I guess my friend stayed up, staring at it, and she woke us up about 5 minutes later, saying she thought it was actually a person. Right then, we looked at what we saw, and we saw the shadow move a little, and it clearly was a tall person's silhouette. We started freaking out, and then we saw 2 green laser lights. They were just 2 small pinpoint lights that were coming from the guy's head area. We all thought it was binoculars. At this point, we were on high alert, and our eyes had adjusted a little, and we saw that it was clearly a guy looking into our kitchen window. I was too scared to go tell my parents all the way upstairs and past the view of the guy looking in the window. So we used my friend's cell phone and called the home phone. None of us owned cell phones at the time. It rang loudly, and we watched the guy run full speed off the deck. As soon as he ran away, the 3 of us ran screaming upstairs and told my dad. He called the cops, and they searched the streets but never found the guy. Now, here's where things got weird. So, just 2 weeks earlier, the town's police station sent out notices in the neighborhood telling us that a person of interest and a dangerous sexual predator who had a warrant for his arrest had been spotted in our area. Link to the Wikipedia below. A tip had said that he was staying with a family member 3 streets down from us, and I remember this because I remember my mom, who was a bit paranoid, drove us by the address of the house on the notice one time and made us very aware that this was going on, and would not let us ride our bikes outside during the time. Turns out maybe 2 or 3 months later, the same man was apprehended for kidnapping and abuse and murders of 2 children and killing their family in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Only 2-ish hours away from my house. In some of his interrogations, he confessed to stalking the kids by watching their homes at night vision goggles. The same green lights we saw that night. I also one time found some obscure website that had some of his writings where he discussed living in Montana. At various times, and discussed that right before killing his family, he was searching for children to kidnap. Well, would you look at that? "11 consecutive life sentences. Life without parole." Should I read another one? That looks weird. But they're all weird. Might as well just read this one. Oh my god. This took place in November of 2007. My junior year of high school in my hometown. I lived in a small Midwestern city that, in all honesty, seemed completely safe. One night, my 2 friends and I were hanging out at my house in the living room. We stopped by my house after he had gone to a local coffee shop, but we wanted to leave again to get late night Jimmy John's. I'll try to paint a picture of my living room to the best of my abilities. The couch was against the front windows, and there were 3, and the curtains only slightly obscured 2 of them, facing our inactive fireplace. There was a small nook right next to the fireplace that held a large plush green chair. The chair faced the front windows and was directly next to our entertainment center. My house had two main entrances, the front door, which no one used and was perpetually blocked, and the side door, which was attached to the kitchen. You gotta love a story where they gotta establish the layout of the house. Fuck me. The first floor of the house was basically one long hallway, each room leading to the other through large archways and no doors. On this particular, my friend and I decided to watch TV before heading out again. It was around midnight, and I was sitting in the green chair, and my friend was laying on the couch facing me. I could tell the other two were falling asleep, and decided I'd rest my eyes as well. A few moments later, my cat burst into the room and up the stairs. I didn't think much of it. She was a skittish cat, so I shut my eyes again. The next thing I know, I hear my friend whispering my name over and over. I turned my head towards her, and she was pointing in the direction of my dining room, which was behind the living room and kitchen. From my point of view, I couldn't see the entrance of the dining room. I was tucked in the nook by the fireplace. My friend was persistent, and her voice grew louder and louder until I decided I couldn't avoid looking. I scooted up the very edge of the seat and peered over, and holy shit, a man was standing there. He was scrawny and short and wore a ski mask. And that's it. The dude was completely and utterly naked. He just stood there completely calm, taking turns at staring at each of us. I could also see he was carrying a bundle under his arm. We all looked at each other. For a few beats, my mind was racing. What the fuck was happening? Was this a joke? Should we charge him? What if he was carrying a gun or a knife? After those brief moments were over, we all started screaming. I don't know if I've ever screamed so loud in my life. I took off towards the stairs, and as I reached them and looked back, I saw him calmly turn and walk back towards the dining room. We reached my parents' room, flung ourselves in, and barricaded the door. My parents, who were asleep at the time, woke up in a panic, and we all started screaming about what had just taken place. The calmest of the three of us managed to call 911 within 20 minutes. There were squad cars all outside our house. They took our individual statements and searched the property, and one cop came back inside after searching our property and the surrounding neighborhood. He told us that there were distinct footprints in the frost directly in front of our property, in front of the living room windows. They surmised that he had been standing there for hours, trying to get our attention, and frustrated entered our house after those failed attempts. We stupidly left the door unlocked because we assumed we'd be leaving soon after. I honestly have no idea if they ever caught the man. When I was still living in my hometown, I would be at random store and think I saw him, because honestly I remember his goddamn eyes so well. They were completely devoid of any emotion. So, creepy ski mask naked peeping Tom, let's not ever meet again. You know, let's read another, right? Because why not? Ego conscious. So, I'm almost through all of my LNM personal stories. Congratulations. I had just rented and moved into a small but very cute house in Sacramento, California. was very excited because my best friend Lonnie lived right around the corner, so we had many grand hangout plans. For those familiar, it was a neighborhood bordering between Tahoe Park, a nicer older neighborhood, and a not far from South Sacramento. So on the edge of sketchy, because South Sac is a rough area and with lots of gang violence. This is relevant, so you say. Let me set up the layout so that you understand the various perspectives, because this layout is important to the story. And when I stepped out the front door, standing on the front porch, I would be facing the street. To my right is the front window, and the corner of the house beyond which is a small patio and a detached garage. Looking to my left, there are two front-facing windows with views into the living room, and there is a small paved walkway between that, oh my God, front wall of the house, and a large flower bed with two very big camellia bushes. Follow that little walkway between the two front windows and the camellias, and you come to the other front corner of the house. Step left around to that side of the house. There's another window. That the window looks directly through the length of the living room all the way to the other side of the house. Wall-to-wall view. Yeah, you know. Are you interested in buying this property? Anyway, the landlord, a man who lived there prior to me moving in, already had these pretty blue floral material curtains on the windows. Not drapes, but simply material with no backing on those cheap little curtain rods that you can put inside the window frame walls and are held up by tension. Right? Very pretty, but not very private. Okay. So I had been there less than a week and invited Lonnie over on a Saturday night to drink some beer and smoke some weed. When Saturday Night Live was over, she headed home. Yeah, y'all niggas are lame. Who's watching this show? I closed the door after I saw her pulling out of the driveway, but stepped right back out again to call for my cat. It was absolutely dead quiet. I mean, not a car. Still very quiet. I mean, it was like 1 a.m, so I am whisper calling my cat as not to make too much noise in a quiet night. I am looking to my right towards the garage and patio area because he usually would come out from that distance, still whisper calling, no cat. So just as I turned my head to the left to start whisper calling in that direction, I saw a man do this crab step side jump from the side corner of the house with full view window to then hide behind the large camellia bushes. Fuck me running, are you kidding? I don't know for how long, but he had clearly been peeping on me and Lonnie, and remained there after she left, so he knew I was alone. In the instant that I saw him, I could tell he was wearing a fanny pack. I know some people still wear them today, but they were already out of fashion by that time, and my first thought was rape kit. Now, I am a tall woman with a naturally deep voice. Nice. And that sent a wave of terror through my body, and I immediately started shaking. But I was not having this, and he was not going to think that he had outwitted me, or that I was afraid of this son of a bitch, and that this was my first rodeo. I was still at my front door and knew I could instantly get in and lock it if I commanded, as I was, oh my God, if I had to. So I drew myself and took a deep breath, dropped by my already deep voice lower, and shouted as loud as I could in a commanding voice, "What are you doing over there?" My voice just boomed through the dead quiet night like a shockwave. I heard a little critters in the shrubs skittering away, and I must have sounded like some enraged, raged she-man. At least I hope I did, because I intended to. And you know what happened next? Instead of just taking off, he actually answered me. He shuffled a little and mumbled, "I'm looking for my cat. Come on, kitty, here, kitty," and made his way the fuck out of there. I must have surprised him, rattled him enough that motherfucker felt he needed to give me an answer. That's right, bitch. I asked you a question. Having spent my courage, I jumped back into the house, called 911, and called Lonnie. She immediately came back over to stay with me until the police arrived. Only the police never arrived. Remember that I'm living in the fringe of gangland in South Sacramento? Yeah, well, apparently Saturday nights are the peak nights for gang warfare, drive-by shootings, and just violent drug fighting, gun shit in South Sac. So my peeping asshole was not high on the priority list, like nowhere near close to being on the police radar that night. So after about an hour and another call to the 911, we decided fuck it. We jumped in her truck and went riding around looking for the fucker, called the police again and told them what we were doing. Naturally, we were advised that this is not a good idea. We assured the operator that we were not going to engage him, just find him. I understand the position that the police were in, with what the gang show going down in South Sacramento, but I need a cop too. And one isn't coming, so we are taking back control. We are going looking for the fucker. We never found him, and eventually went back to my place, and she spent the night with me. We slept on the floor downstairs because we didn't want to be upstairs and not hear if someone tried to break in. At 4:30 that morning, we were scared awake by the police shining their lights through the windows. Scared the shit out of us for the moment before we realized it was the police. I answered the door and talked to them, but what the hell were they going to do now? The guy had been long gone. So hey, fanny pack, rape kit, dickless, bitch, peeper guy. Let's not meet again. God, women make the worst storytellers. Fuck me. Well, you got a problem with that? You're a woman, you got a problem with that? I'll read one more to calm your female ass down. How about that? Look at the names of some of these. The high-rise creeper, the window wanker, the night of the blood-covered nutcase. A true story in parentheses. Oh my God. These stories are the worst. Let's read the nutcase one, man. You know, this ought to be good. Here's a creepy incident that I endured some years ago. I'm a 41-year-old male, but the following events happened to me in 1999. When I was 24 years old, it's important to mention that I had an average build and was never a tough guy. I was working the graveyard shift at a motel in Oregon. My job title was night auditor, and I was expected to compare the daily revenue with the figures on the computer. Occasionally, someone would check in or out, but for the most part, I hardly saw a soul on my shift. My only other duty was to walk around the property every couple of hours to make sure there was nothing unusual going on. Checking the darkened property at night was always a little bit creepy. The motel had a lot of rooms, and the large parking lot offered a great many hiding spots for anyone who might be lurking. In my first few months, I had to chase the occasional bum off the property or out of the lobby. They always wanted the shelter and free coffee, but my typical night was extremely uneventful. Nonetheless, I was never about being antagonized by violence-prone weirdos. So I bought a big can of pepper spray and a MacLeod, those big black police-style flashlights. One night at 3 a.m., I stepped outside to check the property. It was a midwinter and very cold, so I wore my coat. On the opposite side of the parking lot, a large man in a green t-shirt and jeans was marching purposefully towards one of the buildings. I thought it was odd that he'd be outside in just a t-shirt since it was so cold that my face was stinging. He marched to a motel room door and tried to open it, finding it locked. I watched him intently. He marched to the next door and tried to open it, and then the next one. "Excuse me," I said somewhat loudly. The man stopped, facing away from me, his hand still gripping a door handle. I walked toward him, gripping my MacLeod and pepper spray tightly. It was obvious to me that this guy was up to no good. "May I help you?" I added. The guy turned around and faced me. He was nearly 6.5 feet tall, looked muscular beneath a thick layer of body fat, had big, curly hair with a thick handlebar mustache. Worst of all, was covered with blood. It was all over his face and the entire front of his shirt. Even his jeans were wet with blood, all around the waist, groin, and hips, and his pant legs were streaked with blood down to the cuffs. Worse yet, he looked at me with a crazed expression. His eyes widened with irrational rage, and his teeth clenched and fully exposed. He looked like a 40-ish escaped con auditioning for the role in Carrie. The sight of this gore-soaked freak made me forget to breathe. He walked toward me with quick, long strides and prompted me to click my MacLeod on and shine it at him. The light reflected brightly off of his face, informing me that the blood on it was fresh. He was undaunted by the flashlight and maintained his course. "Sir," I said, "are you a guest at the motel?" He continued forward to me. The closer he came, the clearer I could hear his manic breathing, which contained a growl with each exhalation. I felt it was obvious that he was going to attack. "I have pepper spray and I'm ready to use it." "Nigga, the time to use it was when you noticed the blood," I said. His growling became more vocal, and he seemed to hasten his step. At this point, he was about 20 feet away from me. "Are you still thinking about what to do right now? Fucking moron." A quick side note about the pepper spray: I bought the particular can because the label claimed it would fire a stream accurately up to 15 feet. Oh, so he needs to be closer? The blood-covered man raised his gnarled, bloody hands towards me as though he intended to claw my face apart. I pressed the button on my pepper spray can, aiming high so it would hit his face. The stream was powerful and even had a bit of recoil that kicked my hand back. The beam from the MacLeod was also aimed at his face, so I could see the stream of liquid blast him directly in the eyes. It was so forceful that much of the blood on his face was instantly washed away. His eyes and mouth snapped shut a moment before he stopped and did a clumsy half pirouette away from me. I stopped spraying at him. He emitted a long, loud shriek of rage-laden anguish and raised his hands to his face. "I'm going to call the police," I said. I announced that in case he intended to resume his approach once his pain had subsided. "Don't think this is over," he growled. He turned and faced me with one eye partially open and a large glob of mucus hanging from his nostrils. "You are a dead man," he hissed. He faced the exit of the parking lot and staggered toward it. I rushed into the lobby, locked the big glass doors, and called 911. They told me they'd send officers to make a report. The cops arrived minutes later, and since it's a fairly small town, they took a statement. They were particularly interested in when I told him that he was covered in blood. They said they might be in touch later if someone turned up injured or worse. Thankfully, I never heard from them. Thankfully. I don't know if the blood on the whack job was the result of an injury he'd sustained or if he'd hurt somebody, and I couldn't say if it was legitimately insane or if he was out of his mind on hard drugs. All I know is that he was too out of sorts to wash or even wipe the blood from his face, so I shudder to imagine what he would have done if an occupied room had been accessible to him, or if he'd managed to get his big bloody hands on me. Yikes, I say. So they didn't catch him, and you just went on working there when this guy knows where you're at. I would have pepper sprayed his ass good. Keep him on the ground till the cops come. Don't move, you'll get more of the juice. Don't move, you'll get more of the juice. I said, don't move, you'll get more of the juice. Is this an hour yet? Jesus Christ. It's still not an hour, so I should read another one to make sure it's an hour. Can you kill me? I'm dying. I am dying. I've been reading this. I don't care. Don't preface these with core shit. I moved from South America to the States in 2011. I grew up in a country consumed by violence, and getting mugged, kidnapped, or being victim of a house invasion was not uncommon. I always had my senses sharp, was on constant vigilance to avoid becoming another statistic. When the opportunity to move abroad to do a graduate program presented itself, I jumped at the opportunity, packed up my things, and started my new life. Being here in the States on my own for the first time and being my own person was rough. The cultural shock was overwhelming, and I had to slowly adapt. I had left everything behind, my family, friends, and basically started all over again. It took a while, but slowly I adjusted and felt safe. The constant vigilance was pretty much gone, and I became pretty much trusting, though still somewhat aware of my surroundings. I'm a pretty big guy, and I have a case of resting bitch face, so I pretty much kept to myself, and no one bothered me. It was 2012, and I had been here for about a year and a half. I was 25 at the time, and I got into my own comfortable routine. Go to school, work, come back home, watch TV, smoke some cigarettes, and just live my life. That's everybody's corny-ass routine. Work, home, and eating. I used to sit in my balcony and smoke while dicking around with my phone. One night, this dude passed by. I'm on the first floor, and he asked if he could have a cigarette. I gave him one, and we talked for a while. He introduced himself as Nick. He was 18 or 19. Told me he moved here to the apartment complex with his girlfriend. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It soon became a routine of him stopping by, sometimes alone, sometimes with his girl, and just talk while smoking. I was living pretty comfortably, except my bed was a twin-sized, and I found a pretty decent second one full-size on Craigslist. I picked it up and asked Nick to help me set it up in my apartment. That's when shit hit the fan. I always loved gadgets, and my apartment was full of those. TVs, Nintendo Wii, tablet, laptop, iPad, stuff like that. That's how I pronounce iPod, by the way. He said it was cool, and I had all this stuff, and said if he could borrow my Wii. I told him I was hooked on a game, and maybe some other time. I guess Nick must have thought I was rolling in dough, because he soon started asking for money. The first time I loaned him $20, but then he started to ask every other week for more, and I just told him I was broke, or had bills due. It made me uncomfortable. One day I was coming from the grocery shopping, and I saw a sketchy guy outside their door. I thought nothing of it and just went home. I saw the sketchy guy on and off for about a couple of weeks, and it just rubbed me the wrong way. It made me uncomfortable because he seemed really suspicious. I can't really pinpoint why, he just did. The first thing I thought was he was a drug dealer. He just had that look. One night I was sleeping and I was woken up by someone banging on my door. I'm a heavy sleeper, but it was so loud that it woke me up. I was jolted awake and panic set in. I was disoriented and someone just kept banging on my door, not saying anything, just banging. I put on my glasses and it was around 3 a.m. and I just looked through the peephole. It was Nick. He had this weird look on his face, like anger, and he just kept banging. I just stood there until he gave up and left. I then looked through my window, making sure he couldn't see me, and I saw him walking around, sort of prowling. It made me really uncomfortable. Eventually, he left. The next day, he stopped by while I was on the balcony and asked for a smoke. I asked him what was his deal. Why was he banging on my door? He looked taken aback and told me that he had gotten into a fight with his girlfriend and wanted to sleep at my place. I told him not to do that again. He started getting more and more intense about money, and he was draining my cigarettes a lot faster than I cared for. Now hey, I'm all about people having their vices and nurturing them so long as you're not hurting anybody. This guy sounds like my kind of guy. Everybody needs to find and utilize an outlet so that they don't turn into some kind of freaking psychopath, bottling up all their horseshit and then ending up dishing out shit that they can't receive. Don't be a bitch. Don't try to do shit when you can't take shit, because that's what's going to make you female. And if your outlets aren't hurting anybody, then you're free to them. You know what I mean? If your outlet is somebody, then you are the problem, because you're hurting them. But I'm not gonna support other people's vices other than my own. He got his own shit going on. I dropped smoking and just sat on my balcony dicking around on my phone. No cigarettes. When he asked for one after I had quit and told him that I indeed had quit, he was like, "Good for you." But his face showed anger. He left me alone after that. About a week after this, I came home from work and noticed something was weird on my patio. Additionally, I saw Nick with a shopping cart, and he had gone grocery shopping. I thought that was weird given that they rarely had money. I didn't pay much attention, just went to get into my apartment. When I tried to unlock the door, I realized the door was already unlocked. I thought it was weird. If there's one thing I am paranoid about, it's having my doors locked at all times. I went in and my heart just stopped beating for a second. My apartment had been burglarized. TVs, laptops, tablet, anything that they could carry, they took. The TV stand was propped against the balcony door, and I realized that whoever had broken into did so through that door, seeing as they pretty much tore apart the big glass paneled section. They did so that they could reach in and just unlock it from the inside. Then they unlocked the front door and walked out through there. Panic set in. I'd never been burglarized or mugged or anything where I came from my little third world country, and yet there I became a victim. I felt violated. I went to the leasing office, which was still open. I told them what had happened, and they told me to call the police. In my state of confusion, I dialed 911, and they asked me if there was someone currently still in the apartment. I told them no, I didn't think so. And they told me the police would arrive as soon as they could, but it could be a while since it wasn't really an emergency. They told me not to touch anything. I called my boss and my best friend here, and my boss came over and he brought me food, waiting for the police to arrive. My apartment was a mess. All I could think of was how embarrassing, because I hadn't cleaned up a couple of weeks. Oh. The police showed up. About an hour later, they took my statement and asked me if I suspected anyone. At that moment, Nick was lounging by the pool, and I told the officers pretty much anything. Back home, I wouldn't have. The fear of retaliation would have been too big, but I was in America now, and I just sang like a bird and told them about everything and who I thought had done this. They asked me for serial numbers of all the stuff that they had took, and God, I had the boxes stored in Oh, and thank God I had the boxes stored in the little storage unit of my apartment. I got the contact info with them and gave them the information. Later that night, someone knocked on my door again around 11 p.m. I freaked the fuck out. I looked through the peephole and asked who it was, said it was the night security guy and he had a question. I opened the door just a little and asked what he wanted. He was with another girl. Apparently, someone had tried to break in that girl's apartment that day too. She noticed that her patio was a mess and came to find him, and he told her someone had broken into her place. The security guy told me that there had been several cars that had been broken into the last couple of months, and that several patios had been burglarized as well. Well, shit. The next day, the police got in contact with me and said that they had found some of my stuff. Nick was indeed the culprit. He had pawned one of my TVs, and he had given my laptop to his girlfriend. He was arrested, dirty bitch. The police managed to track all my stuff down and said I could pick them up on Monday. Nick apparently was trolling for drug money, and I had given my tablet to one of his dealers. I wonder if it was the same sketchy guy I had seen around. As for Nick, I guess his parents bailed him out, and him and his girlfriend were, of course, evicted from the apartment. I changed the lock so that they would need a key to open the doors both from the inside and outside, and added bolts to both the front and the back door. I grabbed a knife and kept it hidden yet readily available just in case for when I slept. In 2015, I wondered what happened to Nick. I googled his name and came to find that he was in prison because he tried to mug an old lady in an ATM with a knife. I really hope I don't run into him ever again. So there you have it. I felt safe and let my guard down. Nothing seemed suspicious until it was too late. I shouldn't have left him in my apartment. I shouldn't have let him into my apartment. I shouldn't have given him money. There's just so many I shouldn't haves that are dwelling on now that I make sense. But I learned and I'm always alert. And that's my story. Well, I'm sure you'll never meet that vagabond again. Hopefully there's a takeaway here, everyone. You know, if you're like me, you've learned through experience that people can be assholes. And you just shut yourself off to the majority of people, unfortunately. But you shouldn't have to live your life like that, you know what I mean? Let these things that happen to you, whether they be negative or positive, serve as a lesson and mold you. Make it so that these things are things that develop you. Be careful, you know? The key in that story is that for some reason he had actually hung on to the boxes that he received, which had the serial numbers on them, which made it so that they could identify each of the items that were taken and track them down, you know. So lucky for him. Poor guy, giving him all his cigarettes. Just be careful, or you may meet someone that you'll be wanting to not meet. I don't know. How the fuck? What do you want me to say? You'll meet somebody and be all like, let's not meet again. These are so stupid. See you later.